Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are back with more Autobiography of a Freedom Writer. Let's jump back into this. Get the bookmark out here. Okay. Our family did not need a whole lot. We were an island in a sea of poverty. My father made a little money in his logging business, but he wasn't in it for himself. After caring for his family, Enoch Barnes' top priority was to help the common man. People often came to him looking for jobs or for help with financial emergencies. He wasn't what you'd call wealthy, but he'd give you one half of his last dollar. Nellie and I saw him do it many times. When we questioned him, he would only say, I know that I can get some more. And he would often tell my sister and me, you may be broke, but always know where you can get some money if you really need it. We both put that into practice with good credit ratings as well as good business and personal relationships. We wanted he wanted things to change in Mississippi. It saddened him to realize that he didn't have the education he needed to make the changes he wanted to see. He promised himself that he would support whoever was on the front lines of the struggle for the legal protection of civil rights. He had no idea, of course, that I would get on the battlefield. When he learned of it, he would caution me fervently, son, get a hold of yourself. And ask, are you making some kind of death wish? One of Dad's favorite sayings was, do the best you can. He was born in 1909, and as I mentioned, he was taken out of school at a young age. I have no idea how he learned to do so much since he did not receive a proper education. But he could add and subtract better and faster in his head than Nellie and I could with pencil and paper. However, he could not read well. He always knew when he was being cheated uh, or not given the best price for his logs. Once, instead of taking a load of logs to the sawmills of Monticello or Brookhaven, he began taking them to the small towns of Georgetown, Hazelhurst, and Wanilla, where he received more money. When he was asked about this by the white folks, he simply stated, they pay me more money. Soon after that, the owners of the sawmills at Monticello and Brookhaven began paying him more. It was not difficult for Dad to find workers to hire in his business. Black unemployment was extremely high. The regular workers would show up at our home every morning of the week, no matter what, and bang on the door at 5 a.m., alerting everybody in the house. Typically, a few newer workers would not get there as early as scheduled, and some negotiation would ensue over how soon they start. One cousin would work with my father every day. He would be paid on Friday afternoon, and by 11 p.m. on Saturday night, he'd be back at the door to borrow $10. We'd have spent his money on whiskey. Most of the state was dry, but a bottle of bootleg could be easily found. My sister would get upset with Dad for always lending him money. The logging routine was consistent. The job site would change, but the task was the same with each rotation. Dad and his brother Clark would cut the timber and haul it off to the sawmill. Each employed one full-time driver and one part-time driver. Their brother, Uncle Namira, was one of the regular truck drivers. The two brothers hired other men to drive the trucks, operate the mule teams, and cut the timber with circular saws. Two men to a saw, alternating the pull. They paid the guys well. The regular workers earned enough money to support their families. Enoch and Clark could look at a stand of timber and tell you how many loads of logs and pulpwood it would yield. I was never very good at that because many of the white Mississippians were selling their timber and land and moving north in the early 1950s. Dad and Uncle Clark were required to purchase large tracts of land to get the timber. Ordinarily, the rules of the state allowed access by just purchasing the timber. The brothers made many land purchases. One year, they bought a 360-acre tract of land. After cutting the timber, they decided to plant watermelons in one of the huge fields. Tilling that land took courage. It was highly fertile in a low-lying area near a swamp, the kind of land where one could expect to plow up nests of snakes. When that happened, someone would inevitably run across the field screaming, "Snakes! Snakes!" All the brothers' children, nieces, and nephews helped tend those watermelons. When they grew ripe and were taken to the market to be sold, the profit was barely enough to cover expenses. The brothers didn't plant any more and sowed the land the next summer. Dinner time at our house was the most likely time our relatives would stop by to visit. Mom kept something going with Uncle Clark's wife, Martha. Martha. They were cousins and had married brothers. Aunt Mabel was also a familiar presence and frequently made a fuss about the consistently poor quality of any suppers she was able to get from the school board in Jefferson Davis County. She was never one to forget a birthday, though. She knew the birthdays and everybody's children's birthdays. Mother loved to cook, and the dinner was usually consisted of a full course meal. There were often there would often be black-eyed peas and cornbread, squash, or potatoes, chicken, and rice. As we ate together, Dad would share some of his concerns. Uh, a cousin who was unable to get a loan, someone else in need needed bond money to get their son out of jail. Another lady asked if their son could come live with us. He would often uh, offer room and board from time to time to such persons, as well as the occasional worker who traveled from afar. After his wife passed away, Professor Armstrong visited almost daily. He was a cousin of Mother's. He would bring the white shirts to our house and ask to iron them. He would bring one shirt at a time and never compensated my mother one penny. My sister would get so angry with him, especially if Mother was busy, and instructed her to iron the shirt. My father, who hated snobbery, thought of Professor Armstrong as the most down-to-earth educated person he knew. There were days when Dad would go to work in the morning, come home in the evening, eat, dress, and disappear. Mother would say that he had gone to lend his support to the causes of the learned black folks. I found out that she was speaking of when I gained access, um, of what she was speaking when I gained access to the files of the Mississippi State Sovereignty Commission some 50 years later. The revelation lay in the NAACP minute book that had been confiscated by the circuit clerk of Jefferson Davis County and given to commission investigators. No one knew it at the time, but the commission had been keeping track of individuals who attended NAACP meetings. When I saw the complete document of some 200 names, I couldn't take my eyes away. I studied it with great interest, anxious to learn the identities of these freedom soldiers who'd been unknown to me at the time. They were my heroes who helped shape my life. The list included J.H. Joseph Armstrong, Alonzo Ball, Enoch and Clark Barnes, Ernest Lockhart, Victoria Sutton, E.L. Washington, Willie May Warner, and Mabel Armstrong. All the people listed in that book were people moving to the beat of drums for freedom. No one ever told me about their quiet resistance because I was considered too young to be trusted with such weighty information. The mere mention of NAACP would invite trouble into one's home. Therefore, it was just not spoken of openly, especially in the rural areas. Interestingly, I had learned later that the Sovereignty Commission kept a record of Professor Armstrong during the time he was a principal at Prentice Institute. Apparently, he became a target due to his 6-month subscription to the Jackson Advocate, a black newspaper, along with the candidacy for the Lily White Jefferson Davis with his candidacy for the Lily White Jefferson Davis County Board of Education. So we're getting more in depth on how things are, how things go. Seeing how many of the people in the neighborhood have to do things in secret, in quiet. But yeah, he's talking about when he later comes across the minute book and it shows so many of these people, he just didn't recognize it at the time, who were involved in the fight for civil rights. But I'm going to go ahead and end this episode there. Thank you all for watching. As always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, and learn. Someone tries to tell you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, later.